The biting wind tore through the valley, carrying with it the quiet hum of the Galactic Enforcer's ship as it touched down on the rugged alien terrain. His mission had brought him across 5 star systems through endless dangers and treacherous leads, all to find her the rebel queen. The Council's orders had been clear: bring her in alive if possible, eliminate if necessary. The Enforcer's footsteps echoed through the stark silence as he moved through the valley, his gaze sharp, his every sense alert. The landscape stretched wide and unforgiving before him, nothing but barren cliffs and shadows cast by the planet's crimson sun. He was known for his precision, his ruthless efficiency. But today something felt different, a strange sensation curling in his chest, and then he saw her. She stood alone, waiting at the mouth of a hidden sanctuary, her silhouette framed by the alien stone formations. Her figure was elegant, wrapped in flowing fabrics that shimmered faintly in the low light. She didn't look like someone on the run, rather like a queen expecting a visitor. She held herself with a grace and calm that unsettled him, as though she had known he would come. "So the Council sends its best hunter," she said, her voice drifting through the air with a tone both amused and unimpressed. Her eyes glinted with an almost playful confidence as she looked him up and down. He stopped a few paces away, studying her with a wary gaze. "Your days of running are over," he replied, his tone, even his stance, unyielding. "Surrender, and I'll make sure this ends without unnecessary pain." She only laughed softly, a sound that echoed against the rocky cliffs. "You speak as though you believe you have the upper hand." Her gaze never left his as she took a step closer, the faintest smirk curving her lips. She was captivating in a way that unsettled him. Her confidence was strange, her demeanor calm as if she knew something he did not. He tightened his grip on his weapon, feeling a flicker of doubt creep into his mind. "I have an offer," she said, her voice soft, her words holding a weight he hadn't anticipated, one that could change everything for both of us. He watched her warily, his instincts screaming to seize her to end this mission now, and yet he hesitated. Her words hung between them, a tantalizing whisper that dared him to listen. "What offer?" he asked, his tone sharp but curiosity clear in his gaze. Her smirk widened, and she leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Stay with me long enough to understand my side, and I will show you truths you never dreamed of." For a moment he was silent, staring into her eyes as if searching for some hidden deception, but her gaze remained steady, unflinching, and he felt a strange pull, one he couldn't explain. He nodded at last, his expression unreadable. "Lead the way, then." The days that followed were filled with whispered plans, quiet exchanges, and an unspoken connection that grew with every moment spent together. She led him through the sanctuary, revealing the secrets of her people, the hidden truths she claimed would shake the foundation of the Council itself. At first he dismissed her words as the ramblings of a rebel, yet her conviction struck something deep within him. They moved together through narrow corridors, ancient passages lined with relics and symbols, from a civilization that had once thrived here. She would pause occasionally to explain each artifact, each symbol, and though he listened with his usual stoic expression, he found himself captivated by her knowledge, her passion. One evening, as they rested in a small alcove, she turned to him, her gaze thoughtful. "Tell me, Enforcer, have you ever questioned your orders? Ever wondered if there was more to life than loyalty to the Council?" He looked at her, his face unreadable, his mind wrestling with the question she'd planted. "I follow orders because they bring order to the galaxy," he replied, though even as he spoke, the words felt hollow. She studied him, her eyes filled with a knowing sadness. "You believe that truly?" she asked, her tone soft, as though she already knew his answer. He hesitated, feeling her hand rest lightly on his arm. Her touch was warm, grounding him in a way he hadn't felt before. Her fingers lingered a moment too long, and he felt his heart quicken, his gaze drawn to her with an intensity that surprised him. "You are more than a pawn in their game," she whispered, her gaze locking onto his. You know it deep down, but you are too loyal to admit it. Her words struck a chord within him, one he couldn't ignore, and he felt his resolve waver for the first time. His entire life had been built around obedience, around loyalty to the council. Yet here she was challenging everything he believed, her gaze fierce, her conviction unwavering. That night, as they sat side by side under the starlit sky, he found himself captivated by her presence, drawn to her strength, her warmth. He felt the distance between them narrow, with every passing moment, her presence a comfort he hadn't realized he needed. As the stars moved overhead, he felt her hand slip into his fingers, interlocking in a silent promise. She looked at him with a softness that melted his defenses, and in that moment he knew he was in too deep, bound to her by a connection he hadn't sought, but could no longer deny. The final trial lay ahead, a mission that would test every ounce of strength and resolve he possessed. She had revealed her plans, her desire to expose the council's corruption, to free her people from their rule. He listened to her with a hardened gaze, yet inside his heart wavered, torn between his loyalty to the council and the undeniable connection he felt toward her. They stood on a high balcony overlooking the vast alien landscape, the wind whipping around them. The stars above cast a faint glow, illuminating the tension that simmered between them. She looked at him, her gaze steady, her hand resting lightly on the railing. You know what this means, she said, her voice quiet. Once we begin, there is no turning back. He took a deep breath, his mind racing, yet his gaze never left hers. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, an impossible choice that threatened to tear him apart. She was everything he had been trained to oppose, yet, in her presence, he felt a freedom he had never known. He stepped closer until they were inches apart, his gaze fierce, his tone unwavering. I should take you in right now, he said, though his words lacked the conviction they once held. I should bring you to the council. Her lips curved into a faint smile, her hand reaching out to rest on his arm. Then why haven't you? She asked, her voice soft, her gaze daring him to answer. He stared at her, his heart pounding as he felt her hand slide down, tracing a line of warmth that sent a thrill through him. Her fingers lingered, her touch both grounding and intoxicating. He felt a pull, a magnetism he couldn't resist, and in that moment he knew his choice had already been made. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he covered her hand with his, holding it tightly, his gaze never wavering. I'm with you, he whispered, his voice barely audible, no matter the cost. She smiled, a rare, genuine smile, her gaze softening as she looked at him with a tenderness that stole his breath. And in that moment he knew that he would follow her to the ends of the galaxy, that he would stand by her side through whatever lay ahead. Together they turned to face the uncertain future, bound by a love that defied the stars, and as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, he knew that his life, his purpose, had changed forever. The ship shuddered as it descended into the council's capital, a sprawling city of towering spires and gleaming citadels beneath a blood-red sky. He felt a deep unease, a sensation that tightened in his chest with each passing moment. The queen stood beside him, her gaze fixed forward, her expression unwavering. He marveled at her strength, at her ability to stay calm even in the face of the impossible. Are you ready? She asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. He nodded, his gaze drifting to her, a soft determination in his eyes. I'm with you, he replied, the words carrying a weight they hadn't before. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was her ally, her partner in a war that would change everything. And he knew that, no matter what happened, he would see this through to the end. They stepped off the ship and were immediately surrounded by armed guards, their weapons trained on them with precision. He felt a surge of anger, of defiance, as he stared down the guards, but he didn't move. This wasn't the time for violence. Not yet. The High Counselor stood before them, a figure clad in dark robes, his gaze cold, calculating. You dare return, he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. You defy the council and bring a traitor to our door. The queen held her head high, Her gaze unwavering. "I bring the truth," she replied, her voice steady. "And I bring a choice. Stand with us and embrace a new era, or cling to your crumbling power and fall." The High Counselor laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the chamber. "You think you can change the galaxy with empty words? You think you can sway us with your delusions of freedom?" The enforcer stepped forward, his voice hard, unyielding. "She speaks the truth," he said, his gaze locked on the High Counselor. "And I stand with her." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. The counselors exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of shock and fury. They hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated that one of their own would turn against them, and in that moment, he knew they had the upper hand. The High Counselor's gaze darkened, his jaw clenched. "Then you are both fools," he spat. "Guards, take them." The guards surged forward, their weapons raised, and he braced himself, his hand reaching for his weapon. But the Queen placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. She met his gaze, a soft determination in her eyes, and he understood. They wouldn't win this battle with violence. Not here. He nodded, lowering his weapon, and together they stood, their gaze unyielding as the guards closed in around them. They had lost the battle, but the war was far from over. Days turned into a relentless cycle of shadow and silence within the council's prison, where the cold air clung to the stone walls and the weight of isolation pressed down on him. He sat alone in his cell, his thoughts a chaotic mix of anger, determination, and longing. Only the faint sounds from the cell beside his reminded him that she was there, that they hadn't taken her away. That knowledge alone kept him grounded, his heart steadfast amidst the crushing despair. Each night, he would listen for her voice, a whisper that drifted through the darkness, carrying a strength that defied their confinement. "We're close," she would say, her words like a lifeline in the suffocating silence. "Just hold on a little longer." And every night, he would whisper back, his voice barely audible but filled with an unyielding promise. "I'm with you, no matter what." Then, one cold dawn, he heard the sound of guards coming to her cell. His heart pounded as he pressed his ear to the wall, straining to hear their movements. They were taking her to the council chamber again, and though he couldn't see her, he could feel her defiance, her unwavering strength, radiating through the walls. He closed his eyes, envisioning her standing tall, her gaze unflinching as she faced her captors. In the chamber, she stood before the council, her gaze fierce, her stance unyielding. The counselor glared at her with a hatred that could have burned through stone, but she met his stare with a calm that unsettled everyone in the room. She spoke, her voice steady and clear, her words laced with a defiant power that reverberated through the hall. "My people will not stand by while you crush them under your rule," she declared, her voice unwavering. "You can imprison me, silence me, but the galaxy has already heard the truth, and they will not forget." The High Counselor sneered, his voice dripping with contempt as he interrupted her. "You overestimate your influence. No one will rally for a traitor. They'll forget you the moment you're gone." But she only smiled, a soft, knowing smile that hinted at a deeper plan, one that even the council couldn't predict. "You're wrong," she replied, her gaze never leaving his. "You may silence me, but you can't silence the truth." Her words resonated through the chamber, an unbreakable declaration that left the council in stunned silence. She was led back to her cell, the guards holding her tightly, yet her gaze remained defiant, a fire that refused to be extinguished. And when she passed by his cell, he reached through the bars, his fingers brushing against hers, a brief touch that held a world of unspoken promises. As they stood there, hand in hand, he felt a surge of determination, a fierce resolve that strengthened his heart. They would break free. They would bring the council to its knees. And no matter how long it took, no matter the sacrifices they would make, he knew they would stand together against all odds. That night, they spoke in whispers, their voices barely audible as they shared their plans, their hopes, their dreams of a future free from the council's tyranny. Her voice was soft yet filled with conviction, a quiet strength that echoed through the cold stone walls. "We'll make them see," she murmured, Her words a promise that echoed through his mind long after she had fallen silent. And as he lay in the darkness, her words lingered, a beacon of hope in the oppressive silence. The days stretched on, each one blending into the next. Yet he held on to that hope, that promise of freedom. He endured the cold, the isolation, the relentless taunts of the guards, because he knew that he was not alone, that she was with him, her strength a light in the darkness. And finally, the day came. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor, and he rose to his feet, his heart pounding as he prepared for the moment they had both been waiting for. The door to his cell swung open, and there she stood, her gaze fierce, her hand extended toward him. "Let's go," she whispered, her voice filled with a quiet urgency. He took her hand, and together they stepped into the corridor, their movements swift and silent as they navigated the labyrinthine passages of the prison. They moved as one, their steps synchronized, their breaths in unison, a silent partnership forged in the fires of defiance. And as they made their way through the shadows, he felt a surge of exhilaration, a thrill that pulsed through his veins like wildfire. They were free, they were unstoppable, and together, they would bring the council to its knees. As they slipped through the corridors of the council's stronghold, the cold stone walls gave way to open passages filled with the soft glow of dawn. They had evaded the guards, their steps silent as shadows, their hearts pounding with a fierce determination. Together, they moved with a unity that defied words, their minds and bodies in perfect harmony. When they finally reached the edge of the stronghold, they paused, catching their breath, their gazes locked in a silent exchange. She looked at him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and pride, and he felt a warmth blossom in his chest, a sense of purpose that went beyond duty, beyond loyalty. She was his partner, his equal, and he would follow her to the ends of the galaxy. Outside the stronghold, they found allies waiting, loyalists who had been drawn to her cause, who believed in her vision of a future free from the council's rule. They stood in a silent circle, their faces filled with determination, their eyes reflecting the same fire that burned within her. Together, they would rise, a force that would challenge the tyranny of the council, a spark that would ignite a revolution. As they prepared for the final assault, she took his hand, her gaze fierce, unwavering. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice filled with a quiet strength that resonated deep within him. He nodded, his heart steady, his gaze fixed on her. "I'm with you," until the end. They led the charge, their allies following with a unity that shook the very foundations of the stronghold. The council's forces tried to hold them back, but they were no match for the strength of their conviction, the power of their shared purpose. They fought with a ferocity that left no room for doubt, no space for fear, their movements a seamless dance of strength and strategy. As they reached the council chamber, the doors burst open, and they stood before the High Counselor, his expression twisted with rage and fear. She stepped forward, her gaze fierce, her voice unwavering as she spoke. "Your reign is over," she declared, her words a powerful echo that filled the chamber. "The galaxy will no longer live under your shadow." The High Counselor sneered, his voice laced with venom as he spat. "You think you can rule better? You are nothing but a dreamer, a fool." She met his gaze, her expression calm, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. "I may be a dreamer, but I am not alone. And together, we are unstoppable." With a final surge of strength, they seized control, the council falling before their united force. The galaxy had been freed from the chains of tyranny, and as they stood together in the silence that followed, he felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction that resonated through his entire being. She turned to him, her gaze soft, a faint smile curving her lips. "We did it," she murmured, her voice filled with warmth. He took her hand, his gaze never leaving hers. "No, you did it," he replied, his voice filled with pride. And as they stood there, surrounded by the dawn of a new era, he knew that his life had been forever changed, that he had found a purpose beyond duty, a love that defied the stars,